Hey, good morning. How's it? Monday morning back from our trip. And as much as it was a good trip and well organized, and I say thanks to the guys that did it, and I'll be bringing out a video later today about it so that people can get a better understanding what it's all about. But left me a lot of questions as to, am I still actually really able to do this at the level that I want to do it at the age that I am? Because to be honest with everyone, I really struggled. But we got it back alive and we had a good time. So here we are. And then, as these things are, you start questioning and asking questions on life and the meaning of life again. And, where we're going with our life going forward. And, we're on the latter side of the parameter of the timeline, and we need to start, if not start, but really knuckle down and do what it is that we want to do in the last portion or the last quarter of our lives. And that's where I'm at. And so, of course, this morning the first thing I see is what I see going on again here in our own country and around the world. We've got this woman here, I can't remember her name, I don't really care what her name is because she actually talks the biggest load of junk, and then dresses it up as a report, on the apartheid state of Israel and the colonial state of Israel and the colonial powers that are enforcing genocide. Israel is the only country in the world in this Gaza conflict where in the middle of a full steam genocide, as they were being told they were doing, that the population of Gaza increased. We constantly hear about, so many thousand people were killed in Gaza, when, we don't mention that it was the entire European world that did nothing when 6 million Jews were killed. It took England and America to come in and stop it. The rest of Europe just sat on their hands, quite frankly, and did nothing when 6 million Jews were murdered. But, that's in the history book, so we don't really need to talk about that. We need to talk about now, and we only want to talk about what happened in history when it benefits our narrative. We don't want to talk about the 270 million infidels and unbelievers that were killed by Islam since 700 AD. That we don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about the 47,000 terrorist attacks since 9/11. We don't talk about that, which lost hundreds of thousands and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. That we don't want to talk about. That must remain silent. But when your nation is invaded by a terrorist organization and you respond, and then apparently commit a genocide where the population that you're trying to genocide is increasing exponentially while you're trying to genocide them, you're not very good at genocide, Israel. I just want to tell you. If you really want to figure out how to do genocide, maybe you should go and talk to those guys that ran the Serbian army during the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict. Those actually understood what genocide was all about. Genocide has just become a word to be used for political narratives to try and, push our agenda and push our story. But, the reality is far from what the word really means. We've lost how many thousands of our own population over the last 20 years, 30 years. No one considers that a genocide. Eh? No, that's not genocide. That's just crime. Make up your minds. You really freaking me out. Because I don't know what you're trying to say. But as that is, so I went and looked up some stuff. I went on to Grok and I went and asked some questions because I remember reading something somewhere that people must understand that evil is so intense and so evil that ultimately it will consume itself. And I actually thought that was a biblical theory, but it's not. It's a theory that's pushed by two philosophers, one being Kushner and another by Nietzsche. And this is what I found out this morning. And then I went more into Nietzsche's understanding of it. And, this is what we've got to have a look at around the world, and particularly in our own country, where we see now that the ANCs are going bankrupt and running around looking for money. And pretty much are going to battle to stand and run a campaign for the election, the municipal elections. And then I believe some guys getting ready to again donate 35 or 45 or 85 million rand, which apparently, according to Ernest Roots this morning, is outside of the ambits of what you're allowed to donate to a political party. So, they've got a lot of problems. But that being said, it made me go and look at, first of all, what this woman had to say now with this whole ANC debacle, and then read that, what's his name? I can't even pronounce his surname. This guy that was caught with the Tembisa hospital scandal, just one of his cars was 52 million rand. Sorry, we'll take the money away from the people who need it in the hospitals and buy ourselves it looked like to me like some kind of Lamborghini or McLaren, for 52 million rand, so that we can flash to our friends at the clubs. Those people must die. What do we care? And this is where I started questioning this whole thing of evil again. And what you've got to understand about evil, Nietzsche says, is that evil will exploit and dominate and control to such a point that it will eliminate everything that it is exploited, dominated, and controlled, so that ultimately there'll be nothing left to exploit, dominate, and control, and then it will start exploiting and dominating and controlling within its own self, and then it will ultimately implode. And this is what we are actually seeing live right now, around the world, first of all, and in South Africa. You've got to understand that there's only two ways you can go in this world. You've got to understand that there is a concept that we experience every day known as evil. And if there's such a thing as evil, then there must be a counterbalance, and that counterbalance is good. And you have to decide, what is good and what is evil. And you have to decide to live your life according to whichever philosophy you're going to subscribe to, good or evil. Now, within these ideologies of good and evil, or these concepts of good and evil, there are ideologies and religions. So we have ideologies that are historically aligned with evil, and we have ideologies that are historically aligned with good. We have religions that are historically aligned with evil, and we have religions that are historically aligned with good. And you have to decide what you follow. I was watching an argument last week between an atheist, well-known atheist, and a well-known college professor who's a Christian. And the atheist started harping on again about wars and crusades of Christianity. And then the Christian professor stood up and had his turn to speak, and basically, started speaking about the atrocities committed by atheism. Nothing major. They haven't really done much. Just Nazism, communism, nothing major. Stalin, Lenin, Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, and others. They've killed hundreds of millions of more people than Christianity could ever have hoped had they been evil to kill during things like the Crusades. Then we talk about religions of evil. If you start stacking up the body counts, Christianity is far, far, far behind other religions. And so we need to start figuring out what we believe. But I want you to know this, the problem with primarily evil is that what makes evil is that evil is something that believes intrinsically that it's doing the right thing while committing these atrocities. And this is the problem that we're seeing in the world today. We have religions and ideologies that promote growth, wealth, building, expansion, personal growth, individuality, embracing all humans, whether they believe or agree with you or not, giving them the opportunity to explore what they believe and live. This is what good is, building. You have one group that is building, that is based on love, that is based on growth, that is based on family value and all of that. And then on the opposing side, you've got another religion that is based on, glorifying death and martyrdom and murder. And you then have to decide. It's a very simple thing, Which side are you going to stand on? And you can't believe intrinsically in the things that certain ideologies and religions believe and claim to be good. It's quite frankly impossible to do that. It's impossible to do that. And you have to then decide where you're going to stand. And you can be a moderate, you can stand on neither side, but stand somewhere in the middle, whether it's on ideology, whether it's on religion, whether it's on whatever. As much as there's two sides, one side that believes these things, there's one side that you always find that are building and expanding and growing and moving forward and bringing humanity to the next level of existence and understanding and knowledge. And then you have another group diametrically opposed to that group, whose entire mission is to break down, destroy, and remove everything that Group A has tried to build and create. Rather than exceed the expectation and higher their own standard, this group will always attack the builder, attack the expander, attack the grower, and try and break down what he has built in order that they don't have to achieve at the level that that group of humanity has achieved, and call it by whatever name they wish to call it, in order to support their need to destroy and break. And this is what we are seeing in South Africa. The ANC is a party of destruction. The ANC has aligned itself with a religion of death worship and ancestral worship and atheism. And this is what we know. And this is what I can't understand about South Africans. You can see them systematically tearing this country apart, but you will continue to go and vote for these people and support them. Because in your mind, you've been indoctrinated and brainwashed into believing that it was the ANC that relieved South Africa from apartheid, when in fact it was not. If you don't understand that, please go and watch Ike Kamala's podcasts. History does not lie. People say the winners write history, but in this case, the winners are trying to rewrite history. And it's not going to work, because what actually collapsed apartheid was international pressure, sanctions, and threats of armed intervention, to the point where South Africa was collapsing as a country. And so the decision was made rather to allow South Africa to try and prosper and thrive as a country by abolishing apartheid and allowing the majority of the nation back into the main fold of politics and freedom. And because the ANC were the major opposition party at that point, they claimed the victory. But they really didn't win anything. In the entire armed conflict, and you can't argue with me because I was there for a large portion of it, not once did MK veterans or soldiers ever win a battle against the security forces of the South Africa. In fact, they never engaged in a proper battle. So you can push that to the side and understand that it was not them that freed you. It was the very people that they're pushing you to hate that freed you. The Western world. That's who freed you. The ideologies of communism pushed hatred and violence. And these are things that you need to start understanding. You need to start figuring out where you're going to stand when history is written, and on what team you were fighting when history was written, in terms of everything you're seeing in the world now. I can go on this video for another hour, but I'm not going to do it. You're supporting Russia in the Ukraine war because Russia apparently supported you during apartheid. Russia didn't support you. Russia armed you so that you could kill people. But it was actually America and Europe that supported you in your freedom from oppression. So, and now you support Russia, where Russia is committing a genocide in Ukraine. You really need to figure out your facts, South Africa, and decide. It's a very simple decision. Good versus evil. And it's not difficult to figure out who is good and who is evil. Lekker. Have a great day. Speak to you guys later.